Hello and welcome to episode 57 of the Rollo and Slappy Show. Today is September 18th, 2017. I am Rollo McFlugel, and with me is Slappy Jones 2, and we are both of McFlugel.com. The show notes page for this episode is McFlugel.com/57. You'll find links to things we're talking about, as well as links to keeping up with us on all of our social media outlets and whatnot. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Slappy, and he's going to introduce this week's episode.
Thanks, Rollo. So today's episode, we're going to talk about boxing, of all things. Lately, boxing's been in the headlines. It's been center stage of the sporting world, we'll say, for the last couple of weeks due to Mayweather-McGregor was a big draw. And just this past weekend, we had Canelo Alvarez against Gennady Golovkin for the middleweight championship. I'm a boxing fan. I know Rollo's a boxing fan as well. We watch most of the fights. It's kind of exciting when boxing gets to be out in front, but it's also frustrating too because you have a bunch of people who don't watch the sport ever having strong opinions about it. So what does this have to do with libertarianism? Well, there's 3 judges, and they made a decision in this Golovkin-Canelo fight that was a split draw, meaning one judge scored it 115-113 for Golovkin, one had it 114-114, a draw, and the other 118-110 for Canelo Alvarez. So you had one judge picking one, another picking the other, and one saying it was a tie, making it a split draw. So if you watch sports at all, if you saw ESPN, you probably saw some of the commentators going crazy, some of the talking heads talking about that 118-110 decision and how out of line it was. Even in Nevada State Athletic Commission said it was a widespread. Everyone's upset about it. So my personal opinion was it didn't matter if it was 115-113 or 118-110, it was still going to be a split draw. But anyway, what does this have to do with libertarianism, Rollo? Why am I bringing this up?
Well, because it's interesting because we have judges in the boxing world, and we also have judges that are employees of the state that make decisions, and both are basically really have some of the final say outside of some more extreme circumstances. But the judges have the final say. They make the decisions. They make the calls. Unless
there's a knockout.
Right.
Which then you have another regulator in the ring called the referee.
Right. So you have these judges, and we can even include the referee as kind of part of the judge.
He's certainly part of it, part of controlling.
Right, yeah, the kind of the controlling system.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. You have 2 guys, 2 professional athletes punching each other. It's a fight. It's a fight in the ring. Now, of course, there's more to boxing than just throwing big punches. There's a lot of finesse to it. But really, it's 2 grown men throwing punches at each other. And would they regulate it with a referee and 3 judges?
It's extremely regulated. There are a lot of rules in boxing. There's a lot of things you can't do, which was kind of the interesting thing where you saw the Floyd Mayweather-Conor McGregor fight is you had someone who was not a boxer fighting a boxing match, and it was pretty obvious that he wasn't used to a lot of the rules for boxing, which is understandable. But that point aside, so we have this system of rules for boxing. We have these judges and the referees. They make the decisions, and it's kind of subjective. It's actually extremely subjective.
Very much so, yeah.
With what they decide, but at the end of the day, people tend to accept it, and there's similar aspects with the state. We have the judges, we have the police that kind of are maybe the referees, and then you go if certain decisions have to be made, which is normally the case, they go to the judges and make their case before it. And the judges usually kind of have the final say. And people usually kind of go along with whatever the judges say. But there is one distinct difference between the boxing world and the state with its courts and justice system. And that is, in the boxing world, it is a voluntary organization. If you're like Teddy Atlas and you think that there's a lot of corruption in boxing and it makes you sick and disgusted and you don't want to have anything to do with it, then you're free to dissociate yourself from it. And you can no longer go to matches. You can no longer buy the pay-per-views. You can no longer, watch videos, read articles about it. And there's really no harm to you other than that maybe you lost a hobby. Or also there's actually a few different boxing organizations that sanction fights. So there's some competition there. So if one doesn't do a very good job, then it leaves a space open for one of the other ones to take some of the market share. So maybe you don't completely disassociate yourself from boxing, but maybe you just say, I don't like the WBO, so I'm going to stay away from them and choose someone else. But of course, in the state, that option does not exist. You are a captive audience. So just imagine that if every month or every week or some certain set amount of time that someone would take money from you, whether you liked it or not, and paid people to box and paid the judges and paid the referees and paid the promoting companies and paid the stadiums, and you didn't have a say, and you didn't like boxing, you think it's barbaric, or you just think it's boring, or you think it's corrupt for whatever reason, but they say, well, kind of doesn't matter. We're going to take your money regardless. And if you try to not pay us, then we're going to throw you in a cage. That doesn't seem right at all. But with the state, that's exactly how they do it.
Right. And I think what boxing does, and before we get to emails, yes, I understand the state athletic commission assigns judges to the fights. But without that state athletic commission, there would still be judges. They would still be judging the fight the same way. And just to talk about some of how subjective it is, when most people watch a fight, they'll see a guy really throwing a lot of punches and think that guy automatically won. But they're looking at 4 points being effective aggression, ring generalship, defense, and hard and clean punches. So you can be aggressive, but if you're not landing a lot, or if you're not really affecting the other guy, it doesn't count as much as a guy who's countering and landing smart counters over top, playing good defense, blocking punches. And people often don't see that and immediately go to corruption. So I just wanted to throw that piece out there. But what's interesting with these decisions is they are important decisions, whether you think boxing is not a mainstream sport. These fighters, these guys, these boxers spend their entire lives training, and a bad decision can cost them their career. These decisions aren't taken lightly. However, they are final, and people accept the judge's decision. And so I think it just kind of shows how something similar could work in the free market. We would have judges you would go to. There could be a panel of judges. They make their decisions, and that becomes binding. And if you don't like it, for example, there was a fight this time last year. I didn't like the outcome. I thought it was poorly decided. It was the Kovalev-Ward fight. I thought Kovalev won the fight. Ward got the decision, and then they did a rematch and settled it, and Ward clearly won that one because it did not go the distance. But it shows it doesn't matter what I thought of the first one. There was a way to solve it. In this case, it was a rematch clause. So I don't actually know how that would work in a free society. There wouldn't be a rematch clause where you can steal something again. But the point is...
You could appeal it.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The point is there would be an appeals process. People didn't... That was a very controversial decision on both sides. The people who were Ward fans thought, yeah, he won, but that was a close fight. The Kovalev fans thought Kovalev got robbed. They got together and figured out a way to solve it. And so I don't really see... I mean, the people demanded to have another fight. They wanted to see how it would turn out. And I think the same would happen if there was a panel of judges, because this is what people worry about in the free market. What if a judge just is, unfair? Well, people would demand a fair outcome. No one wants to live in a system where we have unfair outcomes. Of course, if you look at the system we have now, and yes, there is an appeals process. It's slow and takes forever and is very expensive. But the point of me bringing all this up is that in a free market, which boxing generally is, there's ways to settle things, to find who the better fighter is, and I don't know why we wouldn't do that in a free market.
Well, if you had judges that were calling fights, I mean, where do people get enjoyment out of sports? It's kind of the thrill of
the competition,
what's going on, the competition,
guys, yeah,
and the parody of it, the shock of it. That if you knew who was going to win, then it's really kind of boring after a while. I mean, what fun is there?
Yeah, it's like if you DVR a game, you DVR a game and you know the outcome. Yeah, it's fun to watch, but you're not on the edge of your seat.
Right. That's not why there's a lot of money in sports. It's just because people really enjoy analyzing the game. I mean, there's some people that do that, and I've recorded games and watched them knowing exactly what happens, and but I don't normally do that. A lot of times now, if I can't watch the game live, I'm like, what's the point? Maybe watch some highlights just to see what happened because I'm interested in it. But the main draw of it is to get your adrenaline going, and that's because you don't know what's happening. Or you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the result is. So it's very exciting. It's actually amazing that a game can do that, can get your heart, pumping and all that stuff. It's really, really kind of neat. So if you had a situation where the judges were making predictable decisions all the time, then it kind of loses a lot of the luster that the boxing or any sport brings. So they're going to lose viewership over that.
Well, you're probably right there. However, I think the athletes and everyone wants a good decision, wants a somewhat predictable. If you do these things, then this happens. But the thing with a judge is that it's subjective, and one guy could see a guy who's throwing a lot of punches as effective aggression, and the other guy could see it as out of control, and that's why they have a 3-judge panel.
But I mean, I know you know what I'm saying, but just to make it clear, in case it's not clear for anyone listening, I mean, predictable as in, hey, there's this guy and, he's the favorite boxer, he's the golden child, and no matter what happens, the judges and the referees are going to rule in his favor.
Right.
But a sign of good judge, good referee in any sport or in any situation is predictability. I mean, that's why in baseball, when an umpire doesn't call balls and strikes well, people really flip out because there's an expectation that if the ball crosses the plate between the belt and the knees, that's a strike. If it doesn't, that's a ball. So it is the predictability that's very important in that sense, and that's why only the best of the best can be judges and referees because it would make it very, very difficult to function without that predictability. And that's another thing, another knock on the state is that they don't have that incentive to do that. So when a judge says something that's just crazy and out of this world, like, was it Roberts?
Yes.
That when...
You're talking about Obamacare?
Yes. When the Supreme Court looked at it and he just said something completely absurd where he said, well, it's not our job to make sure that the Congress passes good legislation or not. It's like, what? That has nothing to do with what your job is. Your job is to determine whether or not it was constitutional.
Yeah, and he changed the definition from like a penalty to a tax or something like that and said since it's a tax.
And really what he did was he punted on making a decision. But, I mean, that's absurd. And I think anyone, if you had a referee in boxing that said, well, it's not my decision whether or not, or a judge says it's not my decision whether or not, he gets punched in the face way more than the other guy and fought the way, that's not my decision for that. It's like, what do you do? Like that doesn't even make any sense. So that he wouldn't be able to survive as a judge.
Be fired. And that happened actually in the Mayweather Canelo fight. There's a judge, C.J. Ross, who scored it a draw for Canelo. Not a draw for Canelo, but a draw in the Canelo fight. The other two judges had it Mayweather. It was clearly a Mayweather win. C.J. Ross got fired.
I remember the look on Mayweather's face when they announced that score.
Yeah, so C.J. Ross got fired after that one. How often do judges get fired?
Right, and it'll be interesting to see if Adelaide Bird gets fired after this. I know that they're kind of giving her a break or something. I don't know what that means. I kind of read the article without knowing much of the backstory behind that kind of thing. But they're
we'll
not
see.
saying it's punishment, but whatever. Maybe they're just trying to get her out of the spotlight. Who knows?
Well, yeah, I mean, at least give an explanation.
Right, and that's part of the thing where especially with common law, where how law got developed without the state was that judges would make a decision and then they would give an opinion on it.
Right.
So that's why it would be really nice to hear what Bird had to say about this fight. Let her explain it. I mean, I think that'd be great. And it's one of the frustrations that a lot of people have with sports a lot of times is umpires or referees blow the call, and it's just kind of you never hear what happened. Or maybe they don't blow the call. Maybe they saw something that we didn't see. I mean, remember these are probably, and I think there's good reason to say, referees in sports are the best of the best what they do. So there's certainly, not that they're infallible, they normally get stuff right almost all the time, but they make mistakes sometimes, and that's part of the game. But it'd be nice to hear explanations a lot of times, and sports actually do that. I guess it's a little bit different.
I was talking specifically in this case. If she came out and said, yeah, in the 6th round, I thought this, then you're like, all right, well, that's what she thought. And if she says in the 6th round, I was texting my friends, I didn't watch it, I just assumed that Canelo won. Well, okay, well, then that's a problem.
Right. But at least, and maybe it's not a good, maybe not the best thing to do in other sports because it's kind of, on the fly or whatever. But in boxing, especially because they are judges, it would be great to hear their opinion on what happened because it's kind of a slower thing. It's not like a bang bang play in baseball at first base. I don't know. I saw that the ball got there before the runner did. What are you going to do? But boxing's a little bit different because it's
and they're
kind
judges,
of longer. Yeah, it's you're not just looking at single moments in time. It's over. Over 3 minutes each round. So yeah, if she gave an opinion, and maybe, I don't know, they might do it behind closed doors. They might, after every fight, have the judges give an opinion to the organization, and then the organization judges whether or not they think that the decisions were
competent
or right, justified or not. So
either way,
go ahead.
No, either way, I was going to just bring it back to what we're talking about is if it's a bad decision and people are angry and the sanctioning bodies agree and the athletic commission agrees, well, you won't be judging anymore. But that doesn't happen in our world. Judges almost never get fired. They can make whatever really could make just about any decision they want in any case based on precedent or statute, because there's so many different precedents and you can twist the words and do all kinds of stuff with the state. Why is it that when a Supreme Court judge is being nominated, we already know what their decisions are going to be ahead of time? They're clearly not unbiased judges. And I think that's a product of the system, whereas in a free market, which would be more like boxing. Now, I know there's not agendas, and maybe there is, but a fight is different than politics. But if we got rid of this machine of the state, the judge's incentive is to their clients and to fair decisions, not to getting other politicians elected or other laws passed.
Right. And in that what you mentioned with the previous precedent being sent, that just creates a nasty snowballing effect.
Right. Like if these decisions in boxing somehow had precedent, and you could look at CJ Ross's draw when the other two had Mayweather clearly winning, you could then look back on that and, Adelaide Bird could say, well, in the decision of Mayweather v. Alvarez, CJ Ross decided that because whatever her reasoning was, Canelo won X rounds. That's why I had these, and then it's binding and it sticks, and then you have to agree with her. But, Adelaide Bird may get fired over this. And you just don't see that happen in our current court system.
Right. Oh, no, not at all. It's you just see all of the issues that come of it. And you can complain all you want about boxing with the judges and accusations of corruption. And I don't know. I have no idea whether that corruption exists or not.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if it did, but no one shows any evidence of it.
Right. But at the end of the day, I mean,
if you don't want to watch it, if you don't like it, if you hate decisions, a lot of fights go to decision. If you don't like the way it works, don't watch it.
Right. They're still extremely successful. They make a ton of money, especially for being
the top guys do. Yeah.
Right. I'm saying the industry as a whole. There's a lot of money to be made in boxing. So it's if normally organizations that are extremely corrupt, unless they're helped along by the state, they don't normally last, because normally corrupt things kind of are held together without good principles, without good a solid foundation. So they tend to fall apart. But I don't see the boxing falling apart really anytime soon. It seems to be fairly strong. I mean, how much did Floyd Mayweather just make in his last fight?
He did all right.
Yeah. I mean, he makes about what we do after a couple episodes.
Yeah, 3 or 4 episodes or so.
Yeah.
But anyway, anything to add on boxing versus the state?
No, I mean, it's kind of ironic that we're always told that without the state being the judges and providing the law and order, that it would be chaos and there'd be all this violence associated with the lack of a state. But isn't it kind of ironic that as egregious of a decision that people believe that Bird made, there's been no violence that's come of it, even though that the sport is literally two people trying to knock the other one out.
Right. And, just sports generally. And I realize this isn't like someone stealing your property, but when an umpire says you're out, a player may argue. We're talking baseball here. You're out. He may argue. He may stand on the base for a minute, but he eventually gets back to his dugout. It's not like he stands there and sits on the base and whines forever. You just kind of go with the decision. So if people are doing this all the time in all sports, basically, there's certain rules set, and the ref decides the rules, and the players abide by them. Why do we think people are incapable of doing that anywhere else? All throughout our day, we live like that. There's no law that I have to wear a dress shirt and dress pants to work every day. I could show up in mesh shorts and a t-shirt. I'd probably get fired, though. So I don't do it. There's all kinds of rules that are set out in society that we obey every day. There isn't mass chaos. There isn't people doing whatever they want whenever they want because of the incentive structure.
Right.
So that's all I wanted to make.
Okay. So do you have a free market success story?
I can, unless you do.
No, I don't know if you were going to talk about what you mentioned.
I was.
Yeah, let's talk about that. That's awesome.
It's kind of funny. So I fell in love with ramen noodles back in high school. All through college, I still eat them on occasion, and I know how healthy they are, but I just think they taste good. And I was making some a couple nights ago and said to my wife, I want to know how to make these myself. I think that would be cool. And she replies, why? They're like 39 cents. I guarantee you can't make them cheaper than that. And so what she did, whether she knew it or not, was explaining the benefits of the division of labor.
Maybe she should be on this show instead
she
of you.
should. She would do a much better job talking things like that. It was funny just how intuitive it was. She just put it out there. It's actually cheaper for someone somewhere to make these noodles. I don't even know how to make them. I didn't even look it up, but I'm guessing you dry them. I mean, it's probably soft dough at first, and then
flour, probably like flour and
water
eggs.
and something and eggs. Who knows what's in them? I have no idea. But for them to do all that, put them in a little package, ship them, stock them on a shelf. The store gets a profit. The person who made them gets a profit, and I get them for 39 cents. And she's probably right. I don't think I could make them for 39 cents.
No, yeah, I don't think so. It'd be like me trying to build my own tractor from scratch. It just doesn't make sense.
It would be more than 39 cents for sure.
Yes. And also, I mean, I did recently, a few weeks ago, make some homemade ravioli, and it is a ton of work. Right, I spent all day, all afternoon in my kitchen making the dough, rolling it out, cutting it, making the filling, and putting them together. It takes a lot of time. I mean, you know, time is money too. So even if you can buy the ingredients pretty cheaply, I mean,
it takes time to make them.
Right. And I did it because I enjoyed it, not because I had to do it, which is, you know, think about it, you know, not even that many years ago that people were in the kitchen slaving over it, like cooking for your family and being in charge of the food and making sure there's food on the table was a full-time job at one point, at most, throughout most of history.
Yep.
Now it's, I mean, I cook because I enjoy it. It's a fun hobby for me. So it's amazing. It's amazing the power of division of labor.
Yeah, and how easy and inexpensive it is to eat. I mean, well, maybe we haven't all, but there was in the 1970s with people worried about the population boom and saying if the world population gets to 3.5 billion people, we're going to starve, or there's not going to be enough food for us. And we've doubled that, and there's plenty of food. We actually have obesity problems in the United States. So,
right.
And nobody planned that. Nobody said we need to grow more food here or do this or we need another farm there. It just happened. And it happens because of market forces. Prices bring people into the market and keeps them low. So
absolutely.
Here we are.
So with that, again, the show notes page is mcflugel.com/57. So you'll find links to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and also follow us on the other social media outlets that we have listed there. And also take a second and sign up to our email newsletter. We've got some cool stuff in the pipeline that we want you to be a part of. So sign up there and keep an eye out for things.
Yeah,
thanks for listening this week.
Peace.
See you next week.